if you get used to using food as your source of dopamine and pleasure, you're then more likely to use food as your source of dopamine and pleasures. Welcome back to the Hale Fitness Podcast. I get to be your host today. I am Coach Katie, and I am joined today by
Coach Christina
and Coach Jay.
Awesome. So today we decided that we're talking about a topic of emotional eating. And one of the reasons why I'm interested in talking about this topic is because it comes
You're
up
sad
a
and
lot.
hungry, is that why?
Yeah. Actually, though, I'm like looking at my yogurt there in the distance, just like waiting for the day. But this is something that comes up for a lot of the people who I work with as some of the stories behind why they're struggling with their nutrition.
Yep.
And so I figured today we would get into what is emotional eating, how have we kind of experienced it ourselves, and then what are some of the factors that make it more likely to happen, which kind of leads to what are some strategies that you can do about it.
Love it.
Sound good?
Yeah.
So why don't we start off with this? When is a time that you can think back to when you ate food or drank alcohol to feel better?
You go first.
I guess I can think about the most recent. I mean, I've struggled with both, where I would look for escape in either alcohol or in eating just to get like that temporary relief. And back when I was teaching, it was like the fastest rush of like little like hit of endorphins I could get, like immediate satisfaction of like, I've had a really hard day. I didn't even get to eat my lunch. All I want to do is eat this handful of Reese's peanut butter cups. Mm-hmm. And so I would do that. And so like, I even kept some in my classroom at the top because I was like, this is the only thing right now that's going to make me feel good. Mm. So having it like easily accessible, like I planned for it, I knew it, and I like made it available for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the feeling was, I'm feeling stressed.
And I really felt like nothing else could give me that little bit of relief that I needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I struggle a little bit with this one because I have this like visceral reaction. If I ever feel like I am dependent on something, then I quit it immediately.
Yeah.
And so, maybe it is, for me, it's like a little more like I'm bored, and I don't like this feeling of being bored.
Yeah.
And so, like, oh, let me go, whatever, look for, what kind of cookie they have at the store, or, have a beer or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I would say, and so I guess I can't say like, oh, I had this like stressful job and it made me do this thing.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a correlation between the amount of like stress that I had and the amount that I would eat or drink.
Yeah.
But I can't say that it's like a direct, like, oh, this is going to make me feel better. Mm-hmm. Right. It's just this set of habits where I overeat or, drink too much or whatever tends to happen around the time where I have the high stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So less like, I had a stressful day, I'm going to go home and soothe myself this way.
Yeah.
And more like, maybe I get to the end of the week and I'm like, whew, feeling it. And what sounds really good right now is a beer, hamburger, whatever.
Yeah. I can't think of one time, but it's a little extreme.
Yeah? Well, now I want to know about it.
Okay, you're really going to laugh about this one, okay?
Let's go.
So we hosted a party at the gym one time, and one of the members hosted it. It was a Christmas party, and I had no idea what was going on for the Christmas party. So I walked in, and they held up this Santa costume.
Oh my gosh, right.
And they said, you got to put this Santa costume on. And then they had like the treatment room. It was all set up as like Santa's workshop. And they said, you have to sit in this treatment room and people come and sit on your lap and tell you what they want for Christmas.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
And the saving grace was they gave me a bottle of whiskey And
Oh my
so
gosh.
I was like really embarrassed. So I drank like half a bottle of whiskey in like an hour.
Oh my
So
gosh.
that little, maybe, that little high anxiety, drank a lot,
Yeah.
left that party in like 90 minutes. And
Yeah.
yeah, that was not a good night.
That's so rough. High anxiety. I mean, it's so interesting because, so I was looking at some research around, are there specific emotions that seem to compel eating or drinking more than others?
Yeah.
And there's this kind of interesting study in Australia that looked at like, there was a really close tie for second, but the first was like far and away the most common emotion that spurs eating or drinking. Can you guess what it is?
I mean, I would guess just anxiety, right? What we call anxiety?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
yeah.
too. It was,
So anxiety is in a tie for second with things like depression, loneliness. But boredom actually was like number one by far.
wow.
How interesting, right? Because
Okay.
that's not the way I necessarily experience emotional eating.
Same.
But interesting to hear you describe like, yeah, like I'm bored and I want a snack. It's like,
Right.
great.
Yeah.
All right, I won.
So that being like one of the main causes. But then the others being depression, overwhelm, stress, anxiety, like that suite of emotions. And then way more connection between negative emotions than positive ones, even though some people do also eat when they experience any big emotion, anything that like dysregulates them, positive or negative.
I never thought of boredom as an emotion.
Same.
Yeah.
It's almost like the lack of emotion. It's like, is white a color? Well, it is. Actually, it was interesting because you can really go down rabbit holes in this stuff. And it turns out like boredom, so there's like 5 big broad emotions. And in fact, we have our little emotional wheel over there of like anger is one of them, happiness is one of them, disgust is one of them. I can't remember off the top of my head what the others are. But basically is like boredom used to be classified in the like depression category, but it's like, no, people eat because they're depressed and not necessarily bored. Anyways, like long story short, now boredom has its own special category.
Yeah.
So
okay.
we're not the only ones who have questioned this.
Great.
What is it?
In that case, I am an incredible emotional eater then.
So that's kind of like, so this is, I have thought a lot about this,
Yeah.
especially because when I was in recovery from an eating disorder, like not only was I eating out of emotion, but I was eating a large quantities of food. Like I would really take this to an extreme. And that's kind of like a slightly different thing, but a lot of the triggers were the same. And when I was kind of reflecting back on when I had the tendency or when I feel and still feel the most drawn to that behavior is like, most clearly, it's when I'm feeling some kind of stress or anxiety and overwhelm, and I don't see an end in sight to it. Like, I don't see an easy way out to it. It's like if I have stress and I know that, like, great, I have fun plans for the weekend or whatnot, don't feel compelled. But there have been moments in my life where it's like, okay, I'm doing tree work and it's the busy season and we're working 6 days a week. And I know on Sunday I have to do all of the things that get put off during the week. Like, it's not going to be a fun, relaxing day. And there's zero end in sight. It's like, get me out of this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
experienced that similarly. I think I noticed my triggers when I didn't have little breaks in my day to like let off steam. I thought of myself as like this giant, like, I don't know, boiling pot, and eventually, or like a kettle, and that like it just keeps boiling and boiling, boiling, and eventually like I have to release, and that release came in form of food of like, okay, I can get a little bit out if I have this like little tiny bit of, release of endorphins or whatever that is. But seeing now, like that tells me, like when I get to that point now where I'm like, I didn't give myself a break today. I have been letting this boil and boil and boil, and I never let myself release. And so now I can at least reflect on that and like take that information and be like, oh, that's why I'm here. It's not that I actually want to eat. It's because I haven't given myself any kind of real grace or any breaks today.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, I mean, if boredom qualifies, I can think of all kinds of ways that this comes up for me. I mean, I stopped drinking a few months ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, and the only time it comes up is if it's like a sunny day and I don't have anything planned, or like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's not like when somebody offers me a drink. It's just like, oh, it'd be really great right now is to have a margarita.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's the real trigger for me, is just like, oh, this would be a fun activity right now.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting too, because like so much of that is like, it's an activity, and there's other positive things that are often associated with it. Like, I'm going to do this thing with my friends, and I'm going to go out to this place with this nice environment.
Yeah.
You know, of course, that's what I would do on a sunny afternoon in freaking California. Like, what else is there?
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
So, so I guess like part of why I think it's useful when we share our stories is because like, one of the things I wanted to get after is like how prevalent this is, right? Of like, what percentage of people do you think eat on emotion or make the choice to eat on emotion in general?
Is there an actual answer?
So there's like,
I'm just
not a perfect answer.
All right. So what do we say? What do we guess?
Like, I would say at least 90%.
I would say like, I'm gonna say like 70.
Yeah. So from what I've read, it's like 99.99%.
All of them.
Oh, pretty much everyone, except like the very, very rare people who we just, I don't know. They're probably assholes. I don't know. But also, like, and I think about this too a lot. I don't know if you do, like when you're coaching people and you're listening to some of these challenges, and especially from the frame of like intuitive eating, of when you're talking about like, well, what does it mean to actually listen to your hunger signals and notice when you're hungry, or notice when you're satisfied. And like, one thing that keeps coming up for me is like, we're in this really bizarre environment of like living in a country where it's like we have all these things that we have never evolutionarily had access to before. Like, we're hyper aware of how we look, for one. And then we have all this access to food anytime, and not just any food, but like really tasty food.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's free, it's legal, and it's literally available in like the checkout line of Home Depot, you know? Like,
Yeah. Home Depot.
that's so confusing, right? It's true. And so it's like, yeah, like, anyways, so point being, if you're living in a like weird country, which is like westernized, educated, industrialized, relatively rich, democratic, like if you're not in a country like that, you probably don't have this same issue with food.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
probably have other issues with
Because I mean, we're wired to eat, right? I mean, we're we spent so much of our development years seeking food, and so we have all this evolutionary, like this sort of genetic predisposition to, if there's food, we're going to eat food.
That's right.
And now we're in a position where we're having to prevent ourselves from eating food.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's actually against our wiring to do that. Yeah. And so you're not bad if you do this. It's like, it makes sense that when you're bored, you're like, oh, let me think about eating, because evolutionarily, that's all you ever thought about.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Like, I know that when I talk with my clients too, they sometimes get hard on themselves and they're like, God, why can't I just like, it's a basic function. Like, why is it so hard for me to recognize my hunger cues? And it's like, you have to also understand that like you're going through like, what you've already stated is that like we are in an environment with like hyper palatable food and like marketing that tells you to have this stuff against your hunger cues, against, whatever it is. You're like, I just want this super tasty food. And it's like, maybe you've been eating that way for decades. And this is the first time you're questioning it. And now you actually want to like rewire your brain and get back in touch with your body.
Yeah.
And it's hard.
Yeah, like environment is just such a big factor. It got me thinking about like, what if instead of every McDonald's or every fast food restaurant, there were just like a little park, right? Mm-hmm. Or what if instead of, candy in the checkout line, there's flowers? Like, would that be different?
You would just go somewhere else for your... Got to go a couple extra blocks.
You would just like go to Nevada or something, across the border. But just like recognizing how much environment and like the water we swim in makes these things hard. And so often we beat ourselves up because we feel like, shame for like not being able to fight that. But really what you're up against is pretty significant.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. I think in the end, I personally think it's next to impossible to fight the kind of environment.
Yeah.
What I think makes more sense is to just change your environment.
Yeah.
Like, if you change your environment where there's less of those cues, then you have less of those kind of things that come up. So we were joking earlier about watching football and drinking beer. It's like, I do watch football. I don't drink beer. And one of the things I do when I watch football is I skip through all the commercials because I don't want that sort of input. And I almost never watch commercials for anything because if you watch the commercials during a football game, like it's most of it is about food and trucks and stuff. But anyways, but it's like mostly about food.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like you could have food delivered at your door for $8.99 right now. And so by just eliminating that stuff from my environment, I have less of that sort of, ooh, you know what would be great right now? Food.
Yeah. So this is good. Like this is kind of getting into what are some of the factors that contribute to us being more likely to emotionally eat, and like environment and messaging and how often you're like seeing those messages is one of them.
Yep.
What are some others?
So for me, there are associations, right? And so, like I said, like a sunny day with a free afternoon is like, let's go to the beer garden, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there are these kind of associations when I feel these sort of urges. And one of the things that I've been working on is reassociating those times. You know, it's like, okay, sunny day, free afternoon, instead of thinking, let's go to the beer garden, it might be, let me go for a walk or let me take a nap, right? Or whatever, go play basketball with my kids. And it doesn't, you know, I might do that once or twice, but the association only changes after I do it like dozens of times.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sunny day, basketball, sunny day, nap.
Yeah.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
California, every day is sunny, so I'm sorry about that.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, actually, it's mad cloudy right now. Give it an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, what else? What else is a good factor?
I think for me, it was, the most success was when I would, like I said before, break up my day. So before I would even start my day, I started meditating, even if it was like 10 minutes in the car, because I felt like that told me, like, one, I have control over my actions. I have the control to break up my day, and I can do something for myself. And so, like, with those three things, I felt just more empowered and less out of control of like my circumstance or like of a craving. So starting my day by taking control really helped.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's really good.
One of the there's two other triggers that I was thinking of.
Yeah.
One of the big ones for me used to be going to my parents' house.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
family.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they would always, there would always be a barbecue or whatever. And I mean, it wasn't like the worst thing in the world, but it was always like, oh, going to my parents' house, I'm just going to go through the pantry. Oh, look at that. They have
new food that I usually have. Totally. Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Oh, look
never
at
get-
I think I'm macadamia nuts. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
Wow, that's so benign. My mom was like, I got pizza rolls. I got toaster strudels, man.
Yeah, well, look at the calorie content of macadamia nuts. You can crush pizza rolls.
It has like the highest fat.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, it's been
the
so
nuts.
useful with macros. I think you recommended this to me at one point, by the way, of like, oh shit, I got 20 grams of fat. All I had to do is have like 6 macadamia nuts and I'm there.
Yeah.
So easy.
Yeah, that's
Anyway.
useful for you. For me, I'm never gonna eat 6 macadamia nuts. It's either the whole bag or don't bother.
Yeah.
so-
That's so interesting that family.
Tell me more about that, Jay. The whole bag or nothing.
yeah. That's another podcast.
The other thing is the holidays, right? It's just like we're coming up on, well, it's September, but like in the next few months we're gonna have the holidays. So it's like weather changes, you start having parties, people inviting you to stuff, and there's like a little bit of social anxiety, and then you're like, great, I'll just like temper this by having a beer or some pizza or whatever it is, and then that becomes like a whole thing. You start that around Thanksgiving and then it doesn't end until January. So these are like two big triggers for me.
Yeah, that's so good. You're actually both tapping into two, like some of kind of through research we know is like the factors that contribute the most. And like family is a huge one.
Yeah.
And it's like, not only is it family visits or like returning to a place of your childhood that has these different associations for you, but it's especially true for families where parents were hypercritical of your food choices when you were young. So if you were on a diet or parents were really critical of what you were having when you were a kid, your probability of emotional eating skyrockets as an adult, interestingly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And then the emotion one is another big one that you mentioned of like, well, I found when I control my emotion, or when I feel like I have some sense of control, that I am able to resist that urge more, or maybe that urge just doesn't even come up. And that's the other big one is like, if you have poor emotional regulation, there's some really interesting studies around like people's ability to name emotions, and those who had a worse ability to name emotions also had a harder time with emotional eating. So it's that sense of like, can I even tap in and notice what I'm feeling and exert any kind of control over that? And if the answer is no, then oftentimes people will look to external ways to regulate their physiology or regulate their emotion.
So, okay, that's all sounds really complicated. To me, it sounds like when you're feeling good about yourself, then your mood swings are less high and low. And when your mood swings are less high and low, then the chances for emotional eating decrease.
Yes, and like I would say it has more to do with, do you believe that you have any control of your emotion?
Right.
Yeah.
If the answer is no, things just happen and I'm at the whim of the things happening, then it's like, great, then I'm going to look elsewhere, not inside, to regulate my emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even, the ability to do like self-reflection, like even if you stop, are you able to look within and be like, oh, this is, anger, or this is stress. Like for some people, and I know for me previously too, like that was hard. Like I would look in and be like, I don't know. I just feel like a wreck. I know I don't feel good.
Yeah.
And that's often what my marker was. I don't feel good, or I do feel good. And like, that was it. I couldn't get any deeper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it took like a lot of reflection and like to where I am now, where I'm like, oh, okay, I can see now, like I'm overwhelmed because I haven't been able to take a break throughout the day, or, for X, Y, and Z. And it takes a while to get there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I remember when I was teaching, we would go like through the emotions, and like, I was like, we never did this in kindergarten. I was like, we didn't go through this emotional chart. And like, we didn't ask kids to like name their emotions. And like, here I am with them learning. I'm like, oh, okay. When my fists ball up, I'm angry. Like something as basic as that.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
I have many thoughts about this. I'm curious, like, how do you measure that?
Yeah, that's super hard. All of this, like a lot of this stuff is self-reported. So it's like anecdotal.
Yeah.
And it is like, it's super hard to measure. A lot of these studies too are done on like for people who are like in some kind of clinical setting for obesity.
Yeah.
So it's like, you're looking at people who are also kind of on the extremes and like kind of making deductions from that.
Yeah.
Maybe not as perfect, but like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Cool. I like this. I do think it's like really interesting because, I would say that I definitely feel comfortable sort of naming my emotions, but I almost feel like there's another level to that. It's just like, once you feel comfortable with that, then recognizing that you're going to have them and they don't have to have impact on what you do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's like kind of what you're getting to.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you guys have both kind of pointed to this, and this would be like a good time to go into then, like, what do you do about this?
Yeah.
And you both have identified things that you do, which is like, at the end of the day, it is, I recognize that I have this tendency to eat when I'm bored, and I have this tendency to eat when I'm feeling overwhelmed. And so you have done some reflection of like, I want to change that habit. And so you've taken these steps of like, okay, when this episode happens, when I'm eating out of this emotion, whatever it is, it's like, what's my environment like? What are the things that are happening around me? What happened earlier in that day, or what happened earlier in that week? And for anyone who's like struggling to get out of the cycle, this is basically like the practice that I run through with people. It's like a break the chain practice, which is like, if you want to have any kind of hope of not having that, choosing that Kit Kat bar when you're in the line of Home Depot and you're like rushing between errands or whatnot, is like, if you try to white knuckle it in that moment, you may be able to, but probably not for the long term. It's not really until you like take those steps back and it was like, what were the events leading up to this? Or like, what was the environment around me that actually contributed to my choosing that? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Whereas I feel like the strategy that a lot of people will try to take is this like white knuckling strategy. It's like, okay, I'm not going to address my stress. I'm not going to address anything else that's going on in my life. I'm just going to, when that time comes up again, I'm not going to make the decision. I'm going to do better, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's like
totally. I know that for me, it was having it was my environment. So even at home was changing my environment and not having all of our like snacks in a super like a hyper visible place, or even not having those snacks. So I know like my husband, he has a sweet tooth, and so he liked having all kinds of tasty things around. And then so it took me having that conversation with him. But I think what I noticed too in my clients and myself is like, as like a people pleaser, it's hard to ask for what I need, which leads to that overwhelm because I haven't been asking for what I need, or I haven't been expressing my thoughts. And then compounding that with like, now I have to have this conversation, like this difficult conversation of like, by the way, I need to change our environment for my needs is really uncomfortable. But being able to get there, like one is it's okay. Like I'm teaching myself it's okay to ask and it's okay to like express my needs. And two, I can take control of my environment. And it's like, and you find out like you have a supportive environment. Well, hopefully,
Yeah. That's so good. So you asked for it. You recognize like environment is the thing that it want to change. Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah. I have, it's interesting. You kind of summarized this, but I kind of take the opposite approach. And part of the reason for this is like, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'm going to do 30 days or 60 days of something. And I will the idea is like, I'm going to white knuckle it, but it's different though. It's like white knuckling means I'm just going to push through. There's going to be discipline. I'm going to achieve the thing.
Yeah.
But then I'm also going to reflect at the end.
Yeah.
Right. And, I make it sound like, oh, you just have to have discipline, but actually it's not that at all. It's more like what you said. It's like you're creating an environment where you get so many rewards for doing the thing that you're wanting yourself to do. Like that's what I do is I'll create an environment where there's a lot of rewards so that I'm incentivized to do the thing and not incentivized to, whatever, like eat the candy bar or whatever it is.
So like what?
Okay, so like, let's just say that you have a nutrition plan and you are following like, I'm going to eat this many calories, this much protein, whatever, like some macros, right? So what I will do is I will say, okay, I'm going to start small. First of all, is I'm going to start by just tracking my food. And then once I get to the point where I feel comfortable tracking my food, I'll say from this day, I'm going to do X amount of days. Let's say 60 days. I was just talking about that this morning. If you can do something for 60 days, so I just know this from working with people. Most people don't stick to a diet for more than a week. People here, probably more like 30 days. But 60 days is enough for you to develop the habit and see results, which motivates you to keep going. So I always pick like 60 days to 100 days. So I'll say, I'm going to hit my macros like within, 10 grams every day for 60 days. And when I'm ready for it, that's what I do. And so I decide this is the specific thing that I'm going to do. And there's a reason for it. Maybe I want to lose some weight or gain some strength, whatever it is. So I say, this is the specific thing. So winning looks like hitting my macros every day for 60 days, right? So that's the first thing. Then the second thing I'll do is I'll make it hard for me to fail, right? So I'll have like, I'm going to do meal prep every week. And I have like a simple recipe, which you can link and you can see. Link below. I make the same thing every week and people think it's boring, whatever, it works for me. It's an environment where I can't fail. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I will track as many things as I can so I can give myself as many ways to win as I can. So like I track in, MyFitnessPal and I can see like there's a little way you can set it up so that like it shows you how many macros you have left, and it's like every day I hit it, it's like a win.
Yeah.
Right. I will track how many days in a row I hit in my journal, and like 2 or 3 days in, you're like, oh, I want to keep this streak going. Right. I will write about it in my journal, and I'll even like put it on a separate spreadsheet so that I can see over time how my weight is impacted by my tracking. So now I've tracked these things in 4 different ways. So every day I do it, I get to like put it in my MyFitnessPal, color off the little box in my journal, track it on my spreadsheet. Like I'm winning 3 times just by doing that. And so it's just like, I'm reinforcing. Wow, I'm kind of getting this, right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, the other thing I'll do is, because let's say the goal is to lose weight, I'll weigh myself every day. Now I'm not going to win that one every day, but I can see the outcomes that happen because of the habits. And so all of it just comes down to like, how do I create an environment where I can win?
Yeah, that's so good.
You mentioned in the beginning that you'll start when you're ready. Will you tell me like what tells you that you're ready? Is it when things get less hectic?
Yeah.
How do you know?
So, so this is really great. Like, so we're talking about emotional eating, and like your emotions are unreliable, right? Like you're going to feel great one day. You're going to feel horrible the next day. You're going to be angry at, you know, me one day, and then you're going to love me the next day. Right. It's just like your emotions are unreliable. What is reliable is the things you do on a daily basis. So what I'll do is I'll start with something really simple and small. So like I said, you know, 3-4 months ago, I stopped drinking alcohol. I used to drink alcohol once a week. So it's just like, you know, I'm going to stop drinking alcohol on Monday.
Yeah.
Super easy. All I got to do is like make it through Friday, and I've gotten through a whole week.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, so I'll start with something really simple. And this is from years of experimentation. I used to like do everything all at once, and I would just like 3 days in, I'd be like, like I just cannot handle the cognitive load of trying to do everything. Right? So I would start with something really simple. For me, it's always like, you know, like a great example would be you work out, right? Okay, I'm going to work out every day, you know, do some sort of movement every day. Once you get a couple of weeks into that, for me, it takes about a week or 2 of that before I'm willing to add the next thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the next thing might be, I'm going to track my food. All right. So then another week or 2 of that. Now I have experience with this. So like a week or 2 is probably enough, but if you've never done it before, maybe 30 days, right? So a week or 2 of that. Now I'm becoming the kind of person who can show up every day, and I feel consistent. And so that, going back to emotions, I've shown up every day for 2 weeks at the gym, right? Or I've walked every day for 2 weeks. Now I'm starting to feel like I'm the kind of person who does what they say they're going to do. And that makes me motivated, to do another thing. And then I do another thing, and then I start to feel like, oh, I did this thing and this thing. And again, I create the environment, I'm tracking the stuff, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's incremental. You're not going in and trying to change 5 things at once.
And
then once you get that one habit down, you have a little bit more capacity. You're like, hey, I can actually take on one more thing.
Yep.
So it's a long process. It's not going to be in a week or 2.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
It can be. It can be.
Okay.
It depends on your experience.
Okay.
So if you've done all this stuff before, then it's just like, for me, like the gym, if I take a few weeks off from the gym, I don't want to come back. But it only takes me 3 days to feel like, okay, I'm back. You know what I mean?
Right.
If I haven't been in the gym for several years, it might take me a couple months to feel like I'm back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it can be fast, but generally, like if I was to give someone a guideline, I would say if you have 0 experience, let's just take 1 month for each thing. You know what I mean? Let's start by getting you to show up for the gym. Okay, you're the kind of person that goes to the gym. Let's start by tracking your food. Okay, you're the kind of person that has awareness, 30 days of the gym, 30 days of tracking, 30 days of hitting your protein. Like you're going to get most of the results by then. And it's like, you talk about like making it a long-term thing. If I can introduce a new thing every 30 days, now all of a sudden it doesn't feel like so much work. It's just like little bits of stuff.
Yeah. And fundamentally what this sounds like to me is like this uncoupling of like, where do you derive your dopamine from?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, one of the things that I was reading was the more you emotionally eat, the more you emotionally eat.
Yeah.
Which is like, if you get used to using food as your source of dopamine and pleasure, you're then more likely to use food as your source of dopamine and pleasure. But I do love this idea of reassociating like where you get your win or where you get that little hit from. And for you, it has been through, all right, I'm going to track this thing that is, helping my health in this way.
Yeah.
And then I get that little hit of dopamine from that little celebration.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was trying to recover from disordered eating, like binging and purging, one of the things that I tried was, what if instead of getting this rush from having an entire bag of M&Ms on the weekend, what if I spread it out and I would give myself like a little bit on Monday and a little bit on Tuesday and a little bit on Wednesday, and maybe over the whole week it's the same quantity, but it's not going to feel as bad to me.
Yeah.
And like that actually helped me quite a bit. Was like, okay, it was just a way of sort of like, let me just kind of like reassociate what I'm getting my like big source of pleasure from.
Okay, can I dig into this?
Yeah.
I just absolutely love this. One of the fundamental things about emotional eating is that people feel bad about what they're doing. It's just like, I have anxiety or I have boredom and I eat a bunch of stuff and then I feel bad.
That's right.
Right? And you feel bad because you feel like you should be doing something else.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't change by feeling bad.
That's right. Yeah.
Like that's the real of it.
Yeah.
Is like, if I held a gun to your head and coerced you to do something, you would do it, right? You would do it in the short term, but in the long term, you wouldn't do it.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Versus like, if I gave you $100 to do something, that's a bad example, but if I gave you some like positive reinforcement for doing something, then you would do it that time, but then you would more likely do it the next time and the next time.
Totally.
And it's like, I think there is this just, and I mean, I'm absolutely guilty of this. There is this tendency to rely on shame to make yourself do something.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it's a cycle. And we see it over and over again. It's like I overate or I ate something that I didn't quote unquote want to eat.
Yeah.
And now I'm adding this layer of shame. And so now I feel bad.
Yeah.
And so I'm inclined to take this dramatic action, like never doing that again, or I'm starting this strict thing on Monday or whatnot. And then that can only last so long. And then you're back to doing this thing again. And it's like, comes back to breaking the chain. Like, where do you break it?
Well, yeah, because you feel bad.
That's
and
right.
in order to feel better, you want to do that thing.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So the thing that I have discovered personally for myself is I will never change by feeling bad. I mean, I can make myself do stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Right. But if I feel bad the entire time, like I will resist that. I am a what do you want to call it? Anti-establishment kind of person. Like, I don't like doing it. I don't like rules. I don't like following rules. I don't like doing things because people told me to do. You know, I could say like, whatever. I could say like blue is my favorite color, and if you say blue is the best color, I'll be like, what about red?
Yeah.
Like, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so like I hate rules, and so I don't use them.
Yeah.
What I do is I figure out ways to make myself feel good, in the short term about things that are going to help me in the long term.
Yes, totally.
And so it's really funny. There's actually a lot more when I talk about following macros for 60 days. There's a lot more positive reinforcement around that than anything else. So it's not just like that I'm doing those 4 things where I'm tracking or whatever, but it's also like I talk to my friends about it, right? I share the results with folks at the gym, right? People say, hey, you're looking great, right? I do better in the workouts. Like all of these things make me feel great.
Yeah.
And those are the things that motivate me to keep going.
Yeah, you create this like positive reinforcing cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good. I think similar, like this kind of leads me to like, okay, if we were to make our top 4, I have like 4 items that I'm like, okay, if this is a thing that you struggle with, here are the things that I would suggest.
Yeah.
And that's such a huge one, is like catch yourself winning in other ways. or find other ways.
What, is that number one?
No.
Okay, you said you had 4 things. I need to hear a list of 4.
Okay, well, there's one that we haven't really talked much about, and that is one of the factors that leads to emotional eating is just having a nutrient deficiency.
Oh yeah.
So it's like it turns out if you're not eating, and there's like ones that are the most common and lead to it, like vitamin B is one, fatty acids is one. There's a couple others, but it's basically like. We know most common nutrient deficiencies in this country are protein, omega-3s, micronutrients, basically vitamins and minerals, and water. And so, like,
how would you know if you had a nutrient deficiency?
You probably wouldn't, honestly. I didn't for a long time. I just thought that, like, I always was gonna feel like this level, like it was normal to feel tired, and it was normal to have mood swings, and it was normal to have all of the cravings.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I, started eating healthier, more nutritious foods. And actually for me, it was like, I'm trying this other diet. I did it for like nefarious reasons.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I started doing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I actually don't have to have this weird energy dip at 2 p.m. every day.
Okay. So actually you just answered the question. So one way to find out if you have a nutrient deficiency is eat a balanced whole food diet.
Exactly.
Something like you were doing, like some sort of paleo or
paleo, Whole30, like pick your favorite, whatever.
Yeah. So basically fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, some fruit, little starch, no sugar.
That's right.
Meat and vegetables, nuts and seeds. Yeah. But yeah, so basically like eating kind of a balanced whole food diet and then, seeing how you feel.
Yeah.
And then potentially going back to your previous diet, see how you feel then.
That's right.
And you can kind of tell like whether you've had a deficiency or not.
That's totally right. And like I see it over and over again with clients, and it happened to me, whereas like suddenly now all this, like this same compulsion that I used to have to emotionally eat is like,
it's gone. Yeah.
And it didn't mean that went away for me. What it ended up identifying for me is that like, oh, now the reason I'm doing it is because it's habit.
Yeah.
Not because I have this like physiological drive to do it.
Yeah.
And I noticed that in clients. I was just having a conversation yesterday, and it was like, wow, we added more protein, and suddenly my snacking and my desire to snack went from a 100 to a 60. I'm still doing it, but now it's because of like, I have this association, I have these habits. It's like, great, now that's what we can work on.
Yeah, I find that to be true of people that undereat protein. It's like, if your body is going to want a certain amount of protein.
Yeah.
And if you don't provide it that much protein, then it will eat more of the other stuff.
That's right.
Looking for that protein.
100%.
I mean, even if you're eating like whatever, a bag of Doritos, there's still some protein in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not enough to satisfy your needs. So you have to eat a whole lot more of it.
It's so true. There's actually a whole hypothesis built around that. They did this study with ants. Do you know this?
No.
It's like they did that to ants. Why they chose ants, I don't know. But it was like they gave ants high protein food and then a lot of low protein food. And what they found was that the ants who ate the high protein food stopped when they had gotten enough protein. The ants who had low protein food would just continue eating, even beyond the point where like their stomach, like their abdomen is literally exploding.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got that? Eat more protein. All right.
But it's one of the things, like I felt like I was trying to white knuckle emotional eating for almost a decade.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, and I discovered by accident that it was like, oh, if I resolve these nutrient deficiencies first, actually it doesn't make the other problem go away, but it makes it way easier to solve.
Yeah. Yeah, because your body's not physiologically wanting
right.
to do it. It's just a habit. Yeah.
Oh, there's
okay.
Bell. Yeah.
So
that's step one.
That's number one. Okay.
And then step two is doing the break the chain exercise. Basically like looking now, okay, now that maybe my cravings are reduced a little bit, I'm not emotional eating as much, but I still am. Great. What are those, what's the environment like? Going back and looking at what happened that day, what kind of what was the thing that happened before the thing?
So this is like reflection. How would you do that?
That's right.
Write
Usually
it
have somebody
down?
write it down.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. I had this snack at lunch. Well, what happened before that? Oh, well, I was just doing this exercise with someone. I was doing this online course, and it was something that I put off because I didn't want to do it. Oh, so you were doing something that you didn't want to do, right? And and there was a time dimension to it. Like, you had this level of like, right? So, oh, interesting. Maybe there's an association there.
Yeah. What's really great about that is, it actually kind of gets back to like, what is learning?
Yeah.
Like you can know things.
Yeah.
I know that the right way to eat is this, but until you do it, you don't actually learn it.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying is just like, I know that I shouldn't be eating Doritos, but until you do it or not do it and make some reflection, you don't actually learn that like, hey, this is probably something that's not going to serve me.
Totally.
Yeah.
And honestly, and I've seen it 1,000 times too, probably not 1,000, maybe 100, maybe 20. Anyway, where it's like, okay, I've got it. I know the association, right? It is when my partner does this, and when I get together with my family on the holidays, like this is where I have the strongest urges. And it's like, that's as far as they get. They actually don't get to figuring out how to solve it.
Yeah.
And that's actually okay.
Yeah.
Like step one is just figuring out what that thing is, but don't expect once you've figured out what that thing is to suddenly have it resolved the next time it comes up. Like you have decades, most people have decades of these habits kind of like built up, and it's just not going to happen by, I have an awareness and I'm immediately going to change.
Yeah. Oh yeah, awareness is like 80% of solving a problem. So you have to start with that.
That's right.
And then you figure out, okay, well now I know this is coming up.
Yeah.
There's a long list of solutions of things we can do.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What's number 3?
Okay, so that brings me to self-soothing. So do I have, Brendan Burchard, who wrote High Performance Habits, he has this saying that the ability to self-soothe is the ultimate competitive advantage. And I love that because it kind of
What is self-soothing?
Okay, great. So this is, I feel badly about something. Can I control that? Can I make myself not feel badly?
What if I can't?
Well, most people can't.
Okay.
Most people can't immediately.
Yeah.
But they can keep it from continuing on. So oftentimes, like what we know about emotion is like generally they last 5 to 7 minutes. And there's exceptions to this, like very strong emotions like grief and loss, trauma, we know lasts a lot longer. But most of your day-to-day emotions, 5 to 7 minutes. But what happens is oftentimes you feel that emotion and then you tell your story, tell yourself some story about it. You do something to prolong that emotion. Maybe you're even getting something from it. Like maybe you get attention from it or whatever it is. Like I know I've done this. I'm like, I'm feeling bad. And like, I low-key don't want to feel bad, but I also kind of feel like I'm justified in my feeling bad and I want other people to know about it, right? And I want to be soothed by other people. So I'm going to hold on to this emotion longer than it really needs to be held on to because I'm getting these other things from it.
So what you're saying is self-soothing is the ability to let go of emotions that don't serve you.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So how would you do that?
Well, a lot of different ways. Like number one
Give
is
me
to
like the most effective way because I
breathe.
don't want all the ways.
Just breathe.
Just breathe.
This is like the biggest one.
I do that anyway.
Maybe breathe bigger. It's so crazy, but like breathing is so underrated and it is the shortcut from sympathetic to parasympathetic. Like it is the shortcut from like feeling crazy about a thing to like all of a sudden feeling like the world is actually okay.
Okay. So how do you suggest people breathe?
Well, oftentimes when like these kinds of feelings and things come up, you don't necessarily have the ability to like, I'm going to just go walk into a quiet room right now and like close myself and take 5 minutes and like do this deep meditation. So it's the same way I would describe when to water plants. So I used to be a landscaper basically. And like you water plants when you have a hose in your hand, basically.
Yeah.
It's like there's no right or wrong, just like do it when you've got to do it.
Yeah.
And same with breathing. It's like, great, I'm doing this podcast with you, and if I start to feel myself get a little bit regulated while you're talking, I'm just gonna take a big breath.
Yeah. Yeah.
And usually it's like 3, 4 big breaths, like big inhale through the nose and then exhale until you have nothing left in your lungs and hold it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Will be enough to kind of bring you down.
Yeah. So I love this. It was a loaded question about breathing. I do breathing every day.
Yep.
And in fact, when I think about all the different things that I do, that breathing is a big part of a lot of those things.
Yeah.
So it's, self-soothing. It's just like funny. Some of these like terms just really stick
I know
in my
you like
head.
they're real like triggers for you.
Yeah, I don't
You're
like,
like,
I don't love these terms. Basically, it's just like, how do you reset is kind of the thing. And
Yeah.
it's like, there's a lot of things that I feel like work, and I don't even I never realized I was doing it until people started putting all these terms on it. But it's just like a walk will work, right? Breath work,
Yeah.
like 15, 20 minutes, like Wim
Yeah.
Hof style breathing, whatever. Breath work, a workout, right? These are all things that make you kind of more aware of your breath. Meditation, right? Is
Yeah.
another thing, maybe not necessarily breath, but like, just being more aware of what's going on. And if you have a regular practice of anything like this,
Yeah.
then you actually have a little better control over your system, and you can draw on some of that stuff
Totally.
when you find yourself stressed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. It's like you put in the practice before the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
And then when the rubber meets the road, you've already got the tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And so like a good example is people that, I used to work out every morning, and the folks that come in 5:45 in the morning will definitely relate to this. If you work out in the morning, the rest of the day feels a little easier because like you've already kind of put this sort of stress on your body,
yeah.
and you've, gone through this sort of breathing
Yeah.
type of thing. And then the rest of the day doesn't feel like so difficult. Right. So, I mean, one possible way you could approach this is, do you have a regular practice that gets you exposure to your breath or something similar? So workouts.
Most people don't,
Yeah.
is what I found. Like most people have nothing like that.
Yeah.
And I think there's something even bigger behind that. And I agree with you completely. And I've also seen it where it's like, sometimes it's breathing helps people. And sometimes it's like, what is another activity that you legit enjoy?
Yeah.
And you enjoy enough to keep you from like wanting to go to the cupboard. And sometimes it's like, I don't know, I was working with someone, it was like reading People magazine.
Yeah.
They loved it.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think culturally, we don't always give each other permission to just do things that aren't productive.
Yeah.
And it's like, if that's reading a magazine, or if that's, my coach even was like, how often do you just give yourself permission to scroll social media and not feel bad about it? And I'm like, oh, never. I always feel bad about it. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's also an okay thing to do.
That would be considered self-soothing.
It could be.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Someone
right.
might turn to that. Touch, like anyone who's like worked with me long enough knows that like I touch my chest often. Like I will touch my stomach often. And to me, this is like my cue of like, remember where your breath is, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like that little tactile feedback that for me is like extremely self-soothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's number 3.
Yep.
Number 4, last one.
So yeah,
keep going.
I wanna highlight one thing here is the better you get at this, the less you sort of feel those emotions. I mean, if you have done any sort of meditative practice or breathing practice, like part of what they have you do is to watch the thoughts come and then let them go. And your emotions are the same, like watch them come and let them go. But for me, what I find is when I really get wound up, a 15-minute walk basically solves that problem.
Yeah.
Like there's actually no problem that I have that can't be solved by a 15-minute walk. Sometimes it's 30, but usually like 10 or 15 is enough to do it.
Yeah, that's so good.
So, all
Yeah.
right, what's number 4?
Well, number 4 gets back to the sense of like, we don't change from feeling bad, we change from feeling good. And so step 4 I've summarized as lead with kindness, which is essentially like, if you notice these patterns for yourself, like one way to react is to feel shame and to feel guilt. And it is so, I've noticed for a lot of people, like that's the default connection in their mind. And it may have come from the shame that they were made to feel when they were young or whatnot, or it's just like been prolonged, self-talk for all these years. That's just their pattern.
Yeah.
But if you can lead instead with kindness and from a voice of, oh, this is a pattern that I have, how interesting. If that becomes the response, or even if you can arrive at like, oh man, I just ate an entire Entenmann's coffee cake, which they do not have Entenmann's out here. It's a problem.
Yeah, because we have better stuff than that. We have bakeries and stuff.
I mean, guess.
You don't have to get a factory cake.
You know how thick that crumble, like brown sugar crumbly topping is?
I don't
like,
know.
forget the cake. I will just freaking eat that topping.
Yeah, great.
Anyway, long story short, it's like if you have found yourself eating an entire Entenmann's coffee cake, never done that. No. But basically, like, if you can train yourself for your first response to be, oh, interesting, instead of, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now you're actually in a better position to actually solve it.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I wonder why I did that.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, like, look at me. Like, this is actually my body trying to protect itself and keep itself safe. Like, interesting. What else can I do to kind of foster that, right?
I like this. I have a different take on it, but I really like this a lot. Yeah. I had this actually recently because, I've been tracking my macros and I cut myself down to like 2,100
Right.
calories, which is like not a lot of food for me. And I did it for 2 weeks. And the third week, I had 2 or 3 days where I just didn't hit it. I went
Yeah.
over. And what I did was at the end of the week, I looked back and I said, I did this for 2 weeks.
Right.
On the third week, there were 3 days that I didn't hit it. Clearly, I am hungry.
Yeah.
So let me change it so that I'm eating more calories so that I don't feel that same feeling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, rather than, each of those days going, oh my God, I suck.
Yeah.
And it was, now I have some practice with this, but like that was the thing. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm actually hungry. This is not enough calories. Yeah. I'm going to change the calories.
Yeah.
Now I didn't do it on the day. I did it afterwards upon reflection.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I would say like, it's like, man, surround yourself by people who do this because you do this extremely well. Like I cannot even think of the last time where it was like, oh, this thing happened to me, like I suck. Like like I just haven't ever heard you do that.
Right, right.
It's almost always framed around like, this didn't feel good. What was it? Like, it's very, very rarely is it like, man, I'm gonna do better tomorrow. No,
Yeah.
it's like, what were the conditions that led to this? And let me see if I can change that.
Yeah, it used to be like that. I mean, it wasn't, it used to be like, oh man, I suck. Why can't I get this done? And it's just like, and now it's like, okay, now that's interesting feedback.
Yeah.
But actually what I'm getting to now is like, how I feel about it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
Whether
Yeah.
I have the source, whether I figured out that it was some trauma that happened in my childhood or something my mom said to me. It's like, I mean, I'm in my 40s. Some shit that my mom said to me when I was 15 years old, if it still matters right now, I'm doing it wrong. You know what I mean? And it's like, and it might still come up.
Yeah.
Right? It might still come
Totally.
up. But my thing is like, if I'm doing the actions, then how I feel about it does not matter at all.
Yeah.
And so what I've really focused on more is like, okay, I want X result. I'm going to do Y actions.
Yeah.
And every, let's say for 100 days, I'm going to do
Yeah.
Y things,
Yeah.
right? Or Y actions, right? Now, every single day of that 100 days, I could be like, oh my God, why do I have to do this?
Right. Yeah.
I really don't want to do this. Oh my God, I don't want to
Yeah.
do this, right?
Yeah.
Every single day of those 100 days
Yeah.
might be like that. And I might actually feel like I am, such a piece of crap for, like I might feel terrible. But if I do the action every day for 100 days, then I will get the outcome. And it doesn't matter whether I am a good person or a bad person or whether I'm emotionally adjusted
Yeah.
or like emotionally a total train wreck.
Yeah.
If I did the thing, then I get the result.
Yeah.
And you know what happens? And this is only something that I got with age. When you get the result, you start telling a different story about who you were.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're just like,
yeah.
you're like, wow, I lost 100 pounds. I must be disciplined. I must be, whatever. I must be a gym person. I must be a this. I must be
Yeah.
a that. And
Yeah.
you start telling that story, and then all of a sudden, the story of whatever happened in your childhood starts to change.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's super interesting. You don't have to feel amazing about all this stuff. It helps. And it makes it more so that you'll do it.
Yeah.
But whether you feel good about it, bad about it, whatever, if you do it, then you can start to tell a different story.
Yeah.
And I think that's where like the emotional eating part, I've never focused on not eating M&Ms.
Yeah.
Right? I've only focused on eating other stuff and reinforcing that.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to achieve this. Oh, I
Yeah.
want to,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this half marathon.
That's right.
And I would like to lose 15 pounds
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
And I would like to not feel terrible when I run for the training runs. So I'm going to eat XY food.
That's
and
right.
it's all going to reinforce itself to become the person who runs that half marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. As soon as I hear people start talking about like, I need to just not eat this, it like throws the red flag for me. That's like,
Yeah.
well, then what is the thing that you do want to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, I want to be eating more of this. Great. Let's focus on eating more of that
Yeah.
and let the M&Ms be what they are.
Yeah. People do what they are incentivized
That's
to do.
right.
I mean, it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're I think we're all just monkeys that are trained to do tricks, right? And if you can learn how to train yourself to do the tricks that will serve you, then you will continue to do those tricks, right?
Yeah.
If you learn okay, here's where the anti-establishment stuff comes in. I feel like people that make Doritos and M&Ms and all this other stuff,
Oh, they know all this.
yeah, are training me to eat their shit.
That's so exactly true. Yeah, that's right.
And when I recognize that, it's like, wait, I don't want to fall for that.
Yeah. I love it when like motivation for not doing that stuff is like, stick it to the man. I'm like, yes, let's go. I can 100% jump on that bandwagon. I'm not doing McDonald's because fuck him, you know?
Ronald never
Who
did
cares,
nothing for
like,
me.
Yeah, who cares about my health? I just don't want to give in to the man. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Great, let that motivate you. I'm here for it.
I love that.
So this is good. So like, you know, at the end of the day, I think like my hope with all this is for you, whoever is listening, to feel like you're not alone in struggling with this stuff. And but just because so much of our environment is set up to make this happen, it doesn't mean that you're powerless.
Yeah, it's not your fault. And you can also do something about
That's right.
it.
Yeah. So starting with eliminating nutrient deficiencies, identify your triggers or identify what causes some of the things, lead with kindness, and then self-soothe, reset, hit reset. Those four things.
Yeah, yeah.
Write it on your refrigerator. Get a tattoo of it across your face.
Let's not do that last one. Check with your coach before you do that last one.
But that's it. Yeah, that's it. I think that's all we've got for us today.
Yeah, awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, so much.
All right, thanks, Katie.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in. If you like this episode, we've got plenty of others. Go check out this one over here.